The GAC Emkoo is honestly like nothing I've seen before, and so it took me a while to come up with the words to describe it. That's because it does away with the traditional front grille that we've seen on so many cars in favor of, well, I don't really know what to call it, a front triangular fascia. It's almost as if these slats are like gills on a fish and they're going to flap and move. It's like a vibration spreading the impact all over, and because of that, your eye doesn't really know where to rest. A bit of sensory overload, but let me show you how they've been able to do this. And before we start this video, I just want to give a huge thank you to the official GAC Motor Zimbabwe dealership for making this video possible. All the cars you see in this video, including some of the vehicles you spot in the background, were sourced directly from them. They've been incredibly helpful in allowing me to spend proper time with these cars, drive them, film them, and really get to understand what they're like beyond just a quick first impression. They handle all servicing, maintenance, and genuine part support for these vehicles as well. And if GAC isn't the only thing you're interested in, they also have select BYD models available too, so come and check them out. If you really want to see these cars for yourself, you can find them right here opposite KKK Tiles Eastleigh Corner, Amar Avenue and McCleary alongside Samora Michelle here in Harare. So again, massive thank you to them for helping me make this review possible, and back to the video. It's achieved by many distinct elements of the car coming together. Notice how you have all these individual cladding-like pieces coming together to form the front. And because of that, the way the design is set up and layered, the car has this weird 3D depth to it to ensure that no matter which direction you're looking at it from, there's something interesting going on with the car. The lighting elements themselves don't sit flat with the bodywork. Instead, they push forward to create this shadow underneath. This effect makes it seem as if the lines that make up the grille are leaking into the shadow, leading your eye to the lights. The lights mold to fit the body of the car, and that's something I like very much. They aren't an afterthought like on so many other cars, and that's a very difficult thing to get right on a car sometimes. And if you look closely, you'll notice that they themselves are layered. On the inside, you have your main LED lights. Then on the outside, your LED daytime running lights that push outwards the width of the car, touching the collar before coming down angled so not as to mimic the look of the Cadillac too much. And by doing that, they lead your eyes downwards to the lower elements of the car, which are also exaggerated and interesting. However, they are more traditional in their setup, and you can tell what they are. A bit reminiscent of traditional car design. You'll notice the odd square or two, like the number plate holder, or this very large sensor at the bottom, radar, and, well, other sensors as well. The benefit of such a design is that it hides all the individual lines that make up each panel of the car quite well, integrating it as part of the design instead of something that breaks up the illusion like on so many other cars. But the one line they couldn't hide very well is also very visible, and I do wish they found a way to hide it better. Maybe by stretching the bonnet a little bit. And speaking of the bonnet itself, if you cover up the lower part of the car, then it reminds me a lot of the Lexus GX or Ford Mustang Mach-E. I don't know why, but it just kind of does. Maybe because of its flared out, puffed up characteristics with very strong creased character lines. Very muscular. You could drive this car for years, and every time you look back at it, discover something new about the design. It's a very distinctive look, and with cars going electric and many legacy manufacturers scrambling to figure out how to do away with traditional grills without making the front look like Frieza's head, I wouldn't be surprised if other manufacturers are going to try and copy this design language in future. Let's hop it to the side of the car, and right away you'll notice that they use color in all sorts of ways. Firstly, they use it to accentuate and highlight the lower cladding to give it some off-road capability, or at least the illusion of such. Because when you're off-road, the bodywork rubs against shrubs and all kinds of other stuff. And if it were a painted panel, it could get expensive over time to cover up these scratches, whereas if it's plastic, you could get that replaced fairly cheaply if it gets scraped or damaged. And I said illusion earlier because let's be honest, you're not exactly going to be doing any heavy off-roading in this car. The most you're going to be doing is navigating this country's potholes. The second reason why it's a different color is to make it visually seem taller than it actually is, because your eyes instinctually focus on the painted portion and the blacked out bit kind of gets ignored a bit. And it's the same effect going on at the top here with the A pillars blacked out, same as the B, but the effect is not to make the car seem taller, but to instead make these blacked out sections disappear, making the roof seem like it's floating, which is the same concept as the floating roof I talked about in my Range Rover video. The chrome trim is there and intended to give the car a touch of luxury. There's also a bit of biomimicry going on the sides here as well. If you look at it in the right light, you can see the bold character lines that look like the tensed up muscles on a predatory animal as it's about to pounce. Another interesting bit are the flush door handles, and I can already hear a lot of you going, "Oh, what if my battery goes flat? How am I going to get into the car? It's such a stupid design. I'm never going to buy one because of that." And to that I say, shut up. because if such a thing were to happen, you can just simply push the door handle and insert the physical key that's tucked away neatly into your key holder. At the top, we have roof rails, and I do wonder how functional they are because they slide all the way to the back and become the spoiler of the car, which I have to geek out here and say it looks freaking cool. They even have these hole cutouts in there, which I imagine helps with aerodynamics quite a bit in addition to looking cool. It reminds me of the huge wings you see on rally cars, only this one is way more polished. Now, if you're very observant, you'll notice that the cutout where the brake light sits is a bit of a nod to a visual element up front on the bonnet. A really nice piece of attention to detail. The back end of this car isn't as visually distinctive as the front. However, it has a lot going on for it as well. Starting off with a sloping silhouette. I don't know how much that affects the space on the inside, but we'll find out soon enough when we look at practicality. Framing that slope on either sides are the brake lights. At first glance, you may think that they're reminiscent of the ones on certain Volvo, Honda CR-V or Fit products, but that's not actually the case. When you get close, you can actually see that they have an upper and lower element, with the lower one serving no other purpose but to illuminate the side of the car. Because from the back, only a small part of it is visible. And when you step on the brakes, they don't even light up. They don't even serve as turn signals. I think this is a very distinctive way to give the car, well, a whole lot of character. Lower down, we have a diffuser, although I don't think, well, in fact, I know it's not serving any purpose at all. It just enhances the curb appeal, which I don't really mind at all. I know some of you out there must really hate this trend, but I like it. I like it a lot, so deal with it. And finally, to the sides, we have the exhausts framed in silver, or do we? Because if you take a closer look inside, you can see that there are no real exhausts. And again, this must be a design element that purists hate. But to be honest, it's an SUV. No one is going to go poking around back there to see if you have real exhausts or not. Plus, it's the only way that the designers are going to be able to get away with fitting exhausts at such extreme ends of the car. The real exhausts are hidden away underneath here. The back end of the car is notably more restrained than the front, but there's still plenty of visual elements back here to keep the design interesting. By now you've seen me alternate between 3 different cars from this video, and to the keen-eyed viewer you'll have noticed some subtle differences, and that's because I got to spend time with all 3 different trim level variants of this car. And they are the entry-level GS, the mid-range GE, and the GX, which is the highest trim level. Can you tell the difference? I certainly could. Now some of you may think that I'm cheating and I just looked at the back of the car to see what trim level it is, like on most BMWs, Mercedes and Audi products where you can tell how much someone spent just by looking at the badge at the back, and then call them out immediately if they try to up badge their car. Like really bro, you have a C200D AMG?
I had to stop this Mercedes. It says AMG, but that's a C300 with hubcaps. That's identity theft.
But on the Emkoo, it isn't immediately obvious because, well, there is no badge at the back. Instead, you have to rely on the visual markers around the car, like the side mirrors, which may be the most obvious giveaway between the entry level and the other 2 trims, with one being plastic and the other ones being painted. The daytime running lights on the GS. You have mirrors where the upper DRLs usually are compared to the GE, and on the GX the lights do a little welcome dance in addition to the full DRLs. And finally, some of you may have noticed the wheels. On the highest trim level, the GX, you have alloy 19-inch wheels, whereas on the lower trims, you have 18-inch steel wheels. And for those of you who know a thing or two about off-roading, you know that steel wheels are tougher, more durable, and easier to repair than alloy wheels. Maybe the plastic cladding isn't just for show after all. Apart from that, everything else on the outside is exactly the same. Now, there are more differences to come, but most of them are in the interior or have to do with technological aspects of the car. And I'll be pointing them out as we go along. Let's jump into the interior and see if it's just as nice as the outside. So you walk up to the car and the door handles pop out to greet you. You then pull on the handle and step inside the interior. It's fairly easy to get into because the door openings are very wide and you'll have no trouble at all there. The first thing you'll do is adjust the seating position and get settled in the car. Once you do that, you'll realize that this car has a more sporty seating position similar to the Mercedes GLE, and that's reinforced by the steering wheel, which is smaller than you would expect in a car like this. However, the benefit is that it fits into your hands quite nicely, as it would, I assume, in a sports car, and it's squared off at the bottom, but we'll come back to the steering wheel later on in the video. You look forward and you see the bonnet of the car as you would in a Range Rover, but that doesn't mean you sit as high as in the Range Rover. More so, you're better able to position the car as you get used to its proportions. You look to your left, you look to your right, and you look behind, and the view out through all the mirrors is great. No problems at all, even with the sloping roofline. Now you reach out to grab the door and you notice the odd shape. a whistle of all things, and this is where your window controls reside, as well as the button to lock and unlock the doors. There isn't a lot going on with the door as a whole. It's simple and straightforward, and in that silver strip you'll find some ambient lights in the GX and GE models. You'll also notice the little circle in the middle that's going to be a different color depending on which trim and interior color you go for. You can get it in beige with white stitching and white accents, and some of the hard plastics in silver, or in full black with red stitching. Personally, I would go for the black interior, even though traditionally I like bright interiors. One thing that remains the same is the design, regardless of which trim you go for, especially the lines, which are a bit of a theme with this car. Lines all around. Interior, exterior, they even have them in the wheel wells and other bits and pieces. You'll certainly see a lot of those. The next thing that captures your eye is the gauge car and the gauge cluster screen, which is also another differentiating factor between models. Only the GX gets the full-size screen. The other two have slightly pared back screens, the biggest difference being the engine temperature and fuel gauges being more prominent on the lower trims, with smaller screens in the middle. The biggest one has 3 distinct sections displaying different information at once, and you can switch between 2 views, your traditional gauge or something a little bit more modern, showing you information about what's going on the road. And to the left of that screen, you can cycle between information such as the engine RPMs, vehicle status, trip information, fuel consumption, and drive modes. On the lower trims, you can cycle between the same information, but the gauge faces have a different look. So overall, not really a huge difference. The next thing that you'll notice is the 10-inch infotainment screen. When you start the car, it does a little welcome animation. And as far as I can tell, there's no difference in size between the models. So I'm mostly going to show you the screen on the GX. What does change though is the functionality depending on the optional extras equipped with the car. So this is what the standard screen layout looks like. When you switch between drive modes, the background changes as well, or you can switch it out entirely but only to this green wallpaper. Looking at the apps, nothing particularly stands out. You've got the regular stuff: music, radio, phone, Apple CarPlay, and other apps geared towards the car. Things like, well, the cameras. You've got your parking cameras, including smart parking, which essentially parks the car for you. So if you're in town and you're struggling with parallel parking, the system guides you into a space and then takes over the steering for you. Something that you usually see on high-end luxury cars. You also have a 360 camera system. The car uses cameras placed all around it, like under the mirrors, and stitches those images together to give you a full view around the car. For some reason, when you activate it, it just spins wildly. Don't ask me why, because I was just as confused as you. The system also gives you different angles if you want to look through each camera individually. A front wide angle, a rear wide angle, and even views of the front and rear wheels, so you can see exactly what you're trying to avoid or navigate around. Then we have the My Vehicle app, which gives you control over the car's hardware. Through it, you can do things such as, well, open all the windows at once for whatever reason you might want to do that, or control them individually if you don't feel like using the physical buttons to the right. As you can see, one button opens up everything and another closes it all again. It's actually a pretty neat feature. Now we come to the moonroof. The GE and GX models have a moonroof as standard, but the GS doesn't have one. You can control it through the screen and it's quite large. It stretches all the way from the front to the back, so everyone gets plenty of natural light. And it's uninterrupted, unlike so many cars that have a bar running through the middle. This is one continuous panel, and it's called a moonroof because it doesn't open. If it opened, it would be a sunroof. So now you know the difference. Through the screen, you can control how much of the sunshade is open, even down to the specific percentage. If you wanted it at something random like, well, 76%, you can actually do that, you weirdo you. You can also control the ambient lighting. You can adjust the brightness, choose whether it follows the driving mode, and pick from a range of colors. It's not essential, but it's a nice feature. You can set the mood a bit. Then you have your general settings, things like the Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and connectivity. After that, we then move on to the driving aids. Here you can adjust things like the forward collision warning distance, speed alerts, and other safety features. You can also configure things like the smart headlights and headlight delay. And then there's the heads-up display. And what the heads-up display shows is your essential information, your current speed, fuel range, and things like the cruise control distance and set speed. Then you've got your sound system settings. And so let's talk about the speakers. The GX gets 6 speakers, the mid-range gets 4, and the base model only gets 2, which is kind of crazy in this day and age. But you'd be surprised. A lot of people are driving around with only 2 speakers and they don't even realize it. At the bottom here, you've got quick access to the car settings. Things like drive modes, eco, comfort, sport, and your driver assistance settings. So if something starts to annoy you, you can quickly turn it off without digging through many menus. There's also a steep slope descent system. So maybe this car is a bit more off-road capable than you might expect. but only if you go for the higher models. If you swipe down from the top, you get quick access controls. Things like brightness, media volume, phone volume, and you can mute the whole system instantly. There's also a screensaver mode, just a black screen with a clock in case you don't want to look at a busy display whilst driving. There are a few more tricks in the system, and I go into more detail in my video in the M Zoom. Things like Android screen mirroring, because this car, like all the other GAC models I've tested so far, doesn't have Android Auto. It only has Apple CarPlay, and the alternative is something called Car BitLink, which is basically screen mirroring. A bit disappointing because those who have used Android Auto before know how convenient it is. And then there's this little star-shaped button on the steering wheel. It's on all the trim levels. When you press it, it starts searching for Bluetooth devices, especially ones that have been connected before. What I assume it does, because I didn't fully test it, is that when it detects your phone, it links it to the driver profile and restores your settings, which actually makes a lot of sense, because how often do you forget your phone? So if multiple people drive the car, say your wife and you, it can remember your settings based on whose phone is connected. And if not, it just acts as a quick Bluetooth pairing button, which is also still handy. And honestly, this is all you really need. Some of you might look at this and think it's not as advanced or doesn't have enough tech, but for what it is, you've got everything you need. I'd even say more than enough. It's simple, straightforward, and easy to use. And really, what more do you want from a car? Especially at this price point, which we'll get into in a second. As it stands, this is a very complete, competitive, and competent package when it comes to the infotainment and technology. Yes, you spend more money, you get more features, but the base model gives you everything you actually need. Now, below the screen we have our climate controls, which looks so cool and it feels great to touch as well. Thank goodness they aren't controlled through the screen like on so many modern vehicles. This is a very cool form factor, one I haven't seen in many cars. In fact, the next generation Audi Concept C and select BYD models might be the only cars I've seen the cylindrical shape form factor in recent times. The cylindrical shape is on many bits and pieces all throughout the cabin of this car, as you've already seen. You then move on to the center console, which is divided into two sections, an upper section and a lower section. Let's start with the bottom, which is mainly a large storage area where you can fit a handbag, documents, or really anything that you fancy you can fit in there. In front of that, you have your three charging ports, a USB Type-C, a USB Type-A, in addition to the traditional 12-volt socket. Up top, the color of the panel changes again depending on which trim you have, black or silver. However, the features remain the same. You have your garage to park your phone, only one. Your passenger will just have to make do with holding their phone in their hands. You have a hazard light button, start-stop button, and crystallized gear select toggle switch. And you pull it back to put the car into drive, but if the engine isn't on, it'll just default into neutral. You pull it back to put the car into drive, you push it up to put the car into reverse, and your reverse cameras pop up. Then you do a half pull to pull it into neutral. You also have your parking brake, you push it down to turn it off, and then you pull it up like a window switch to turn it back on again. And then you press the P button to put the car into park. You then have two cup holders and a storage section to the side, and behind that you open it up and it reveals a deep storage bin, and inside a symbol with the key, which I presume is where you place your key fob if the car's keyless entry system malfunctions or your key fob's battery goes flat, since there is no obvious place to insert a key. And getting out of the car is a bit of a strange feeling, because you're not yet used to the door mechanism. Instinctually, your hand goes for the silver trim at the top here, where on the GX you have a silver speaker panel which is part of the 6-speaker sound system. But instead, you're supposed to pull on the back end of the whistle and the door opens right up. In the back, it's more or less an identical copy of the front, as is the case in 98% of modern cars. You can still sit three across, and many of the same visual elements from the front are carried over, like the whistle-shaped door handle. You get one USB charging port, so I guess you and three other passengers are just going to have to share. I imagine that would be the cause of a lot of fights amongst children. You have climate vents but no way to control them. You're at the mercy of the driver if you want air blowing at you. And if you want any air blowing at you at all, buy the GX or GE models, because the base model doesn't have them at all. Instead, you get a little cubby. One thing I have to say about the back here is that it's huge in terms of space. There's plenty of space to spread your feet out and get comfortable, especially for long journeys. I reckon you could fit about 4 people somewhat comfortably in a pinch, and it's not really affected all that much by the sloping roof, because the slope only really starts at the boot, and that does affect the space back there. Let me show you how. So to open the boot, you have 3 options: a button on the trunk, a button in the driver's door, and interestingly, you can open it through the screen. The 4th option is to just use the key fob. You just double press the button and it pops open. And if you try to lock the car with the boot open, it starts honking its horn at you, so you don't forget to close it properly. Same thing if you try to walk away with the key fob in your pocket while the boot is open. And this is what it looks like with the seats up. Nothing much going on here, pretty much basic. But if you look to the sides, you'll see cutouts. Those cutouts are there for the load cover, which this car isn't equipped with. But not to worry, you can always order one online if you really did want one. And I encourage you get one, because whatever it is that you have in the car will be facing the sun directly, owing to the sloping roof on the car, and to keep prying eyes away from whatever it is that you have in the trunk. Apart from that, you have your light to the right, some hooks, and underneath a space-saving tire as well as your jack and reflective triangle. So we're able to fit about 3 crates exactly and still be able to close the trunk. Let's try and fit one more on top and see if the space will allow that. And as you can see, it sits on top okay but doesn't quite fit. But what's important is if the boot will close with it being blocked by the glass. So off to the side here, you can see just a little bit of it sticking out. I'm going to adjust it here a bit and then gently try to close the trunk. And it touches the glass. Let's see if pushing it in further will help. And it just about closes on the second attempt. So now let's fold the seats down and see how much space we have. And to do that is just the same as almost every other car. There are these latches that you push down and the little red thing pops up to let you know that the seat is unlatched. And the seat belt does hold the seat in place, so you do have to move that out the way. And as you can see, the space you get is quite a lot, with extra space on the floor. And with the seats down, you can fit an extra 3 crates up front, bringing the total number to 6 crates on the floor surfaces. 1 extra in the boot if you stack it up on top, and I assume you can stack another 3 on top in the seats up front. I didn't want to try and stack any in fear of scratching up the roof. And that's about it for the trunk. The car has plenty of space even if it has a sloping rear end, and I guess it's more or less on par with vehicles in its category, which are what exactly? Because the GAC nameplate isn't exactly well known. So it's difficult to compare, unlike let's say maybe a Honda CR-V or a Toyota Rush. Because it slopes something like a BMW X6 or a Mercedes-Benz GLE Coupe, but it's not quite as big as those cars. And I think the answer lies in the car's dimensions. So the GAC Emkoo has a height of 1,670 millimeters from the tires all the way to the roof rails. It has a width of 1,901 millimeters, and from front to back it measures 4,680 millimeters with a wheelbase of 2,750 millimeters. Now based on those numbers, this car fits neatly into the compact SUV segment, but on the larger side of the category. So we're talking cars like the Nissan X-Trail, Toyota RAV4, Mazda CX-5, and again the Honda CR-V. But here's the thing, that wheelbase is actually quite long, except maybe in comparison to the X-Trail, and the width gives the car a bit more presence on the road. So while it sits in that category on paper, in reality it kind of stretches the boundaries a little bit, almost creeping into mid-size SUV territory, which is probably why it's a bit tricky to place it at first. And considering the pricing as well, I would say the Emkoo is firmly ahead of the competition in terms of pricing. Starting at $34,000 for the base model GS, going up to $38,000 for the range-topping GX. Compare that to the closest rival, starting with the Nissan X-Trail, which has prices ranging from $28,000 for a 2024 model with around 26,000 kilometers on the clock. Even a 2022 model with close to 18,000 kilometers on the clock will set you back $21,000. And the story is even worse in the case of the Toyota RAV4, with the 2026 model costing close to $37,000. But it doesn't get all better the lower we go down the years. At $28,000 for a 2022 model with around 22,000 kilometers on the clock, you can get one for less, but they still both have mileage. It's the same story with the Honda CR-V. But keep in mind, we haven't yet factored duty for any of these cars. An example would be if we take a 1,497cc 2023 Nissan X-Trail with 34,140 kilometers priced at 18,550. By the time you ship it to Dar es Salaam, that goes up to about 21,341. Then you're looking at roughly 13,170 in Zimbabwe taxes. That brings your total landing cost, excluding local clearing fees and fuel, to around 34,519. Or take a 2022 Mazda CX-5 with a 2200cc engine. At 14,897 delivered to Dar es Salaam, you're looking at about, 9,183 in Zimbabwe taxes, which brings your total landing cost to roughly $24,080. But remember, that car already has around 25,000 kilometers on the clock. But You're saying, what if I just buy straight from Zim? Well, I think you're going to struggle to find the cars ranging from 2022 upwards because of the perceived cost of landing a fairly recent manufactured import. The latest I could find was a 2018 Honda CR-V at 33,000 with 68,000 kilometers on the clock, a 2019 RAV4 for 30,000, another for 29,500, but with no mention of mileage for both of them. Why that is, I'll leave you to decide. And really, it's no secret, pricing in Zimbabwe car markets is, well, really broken. Hell, if you look hard enough, you'll find the exact same cars for sale with the $5,000 discrepancy upwards. But that's a video for another day. But don't get me wrong, I'm not blind to the reason why these cars are able to command such prices. Well, outside of Zimbabwe at least, and it's because of the brand names. The Toyota RAV4, the Honda CR-V, and Nissan X-Trail are all staples that have stood the test of time all around the world in all sorts of conditions. And that's mainly because they don't break down often, and there's an abundance of spare parts and, well, knowledgeable people to take care of them. But what if I told you all those problems are a non-issue when it comes to the GAC? Well, in Zimbabwe at least. Because the cars come with a warranty and all servicing and spare parts can be sourced and serviced here at the main dealer. And if that wasn't enough to convince you, these cars do share some components such as suspension with, surprise, surprise, the Toyota RAV4. So essentially, you're just paying the Toyota tax because of the badge up front. Now, let's get on to the part that's actually going to determine whether you're going to buy this car or not. Initial impressions, it's a very well put together package. It doesn't feel flimsy at all. The first thing you're going to notice is how light the steering wheel is. And when I say light, I don't mean that lightly. Get it? Lightly? Anyway, numbingly light. And how you feel about that depends on, well, on you. If you're a driver who is into comfort, this is for you. However, if you're someone who is, how do I describe it? Someone who drives a bit on the edge, you'll find the experience a bit alienating. And I say that as someone coming from an old school Mazda MPV. I mean the car's from 2006. So as a result, when I hit a bump or pothole, I know exactly which wheel hit what. I feel it in the steering wheel. I can feel exactly what the suspension is doing. I have a lot more confidence in the Mazda MPV. The car is still engaging enough, and that translates well when you're driving very fast. You're very much aware of what the car is doing, especially when I'm going really fast. I'm very much aware of what the rear of the car is doing at all times. When I was driving the Emkoo, however, there is a section of road where I can lift off in the MPV at a very high speed, let it coast for a bit while turning in before applying the brakes in the middle of the turn to come to a complete stop. However, on the same section of road in the Emkoo, I felt a little bit of an alarm bell go off in my mind. Not that I was losing control, but enough to make me apply the brakes way earlier than I usually would in the MPV. Maybe it would take me a little while to attack the corner with a bit more confidence as I get to know the car. But that doesn't mean it's not responsive at all. You turn the wheel and the car goes in the direction you want it to, effortlessly. There's just, well, no immediate feedback or feeling. Great for relaxing drives. I mean, you could literally, and I mean literally, steer this car with a pinky finger. I know because I actually did it. Also keep in mind I had the car in eco mode for the whole drive because your boy forgot to test out all the driving modes. And that includes sports mode too. Yes, I know. And in theory, the steering wheel is supposed to weight up and become a bit stiffer and more responsive, but the good news is you can test this out for yourself if you book a test drive. Now, when it comes to ride comfort, this car is very soft, which is what you want from an SUV. Believe me, firm, sharp handling is not what you want from a car like this, and it stays composed no matter the road surface. That's not to say it eliminates bumps completely like you would expect from something like a Mercedes-Benz S-Class or Rolls-Royce Phantom, but enough that it's very comfortable. That's not to say it's flimsy or limp like a noodle. It handles corners quite well, and you need to remember that this is an SUV, not some low-slung Mercedes-Benz E-Class. There's a lot of weight up top. Now, when I'm sitting in traffic, I have a habit of removing my foot off the brake whilst the car is in drive on a small incline, or throwing it in neutral on flat surfaces because it gets really tiring holding the brake. However, with the Emkoo, you really can't do that because the car wants to lurch forward if you try to lift off the brake even a little bit. So, as a result, stopping and getting going again is a bit jerky or grabby. It's going to take you a while to get used to the feeling or to learn to stop a bit more smoothly. The car definitely has a lot of pep to it. When it comes to acceleration and power delivery, man, this car is quick. And I don't mean it in terms of, well, some supercar level quick, but you hit 100 kilometers per hour really quickly. So much so that I was struggling to hold it back a bit because I was trying to be on my best behavior. And I was driving eco mode, which is something I didn't expect. You'll have no trouble at all getting up to highway speeds. In fact, I think the car encourages a bit of spirited driving. And that speed is delivered by a 1.5 liter turbocharged petrol engine with around 174 to 177 horsepower and 270 newton meters of torque, which becomes available at 1400 RPM going up, which is ridiculously low for a turbocharged engine. So much so that you won't even notice that you're driving a turbocharged engine because there's virtually no turbo lag whatsoever. And it's mated to a 7-speed dual clutch automatic transmission, making gear shifts relatively smooth, especially at lower speeds. What I would say is sorely lacking from this car is a way to change gears manually. So that means you're at the mercy of whatever the car's computer decides, which is a bit of a shame. Even paddle shifters would have been a welcome addition. Braking feel, you feel nice and confident. Visibility is great owing to the big side mirrors, and the rear window isn't small enough that you would complain. The car's proportions don't make it feel intimidating to drive at all, and it's easy to position on the road with no trouble. Plus, with the sheer amount of cameras you get, you would struggle to get into an accident with this car. When it comes to road noise, you can barely hear anything with the windows up, and I'm not exaggerating, it's quite quiet in the car. No squeaks, no rattles, no intrusive wind noise, no loud tire noise, it's just you and the car. Now, when it comes to fuel economy, the official claim is 6.4 to 6.6 liters per 100 kilometers, which works out to the manufacturer claimed maximum range of approximately 859 kilometers on a single tank. The tank is 55 liters on the 1.5 liter engine. Now, because the testing was limited, I couldn't do a long range test. Subscribe to the channel and help us grow so we can do longer range tests and fully test the economy claims of these cars. Now, there are plenty of aids that come with this car. Adaptive cruise control, autonomous emergency braking, forward collision warning, traffic sign recognition systems, traffic jam assist, lane keep assist, blind spot detection, rear cross traffic alert, lane change assist, driver condition warning, lane departure warning, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And all the systems work very well and smoothly. They are not too intrusive in any way, and if you really don't want any of them, you can just always turn them off in the menu. Overall, I'd say that the Emkoo is like my techno phone. It lacks refinement in some areas where other manufacturers have spent years adding layers of software and refining their craft. It's something that I came to the realization after using my Samsung phone for a while. But like Techno, the GAC has enough unique features and the core of the product is solid enough that those very flaws become endearing, charming aspects that add character to it and make up its identity. Some may look at it and say, well, that it's too flashy and that they are trying too hard. But I say to those people, no. They should get out of their comfort zones and try something new because they don't know what they are missing. Who cares about chasing status and recognition from people whose opinions don't matter to you anyway? In fact, I like this car so much that I remember thinking to myself, damn, if I had the money, I'd buy this car right now without any hesitation at all. And I recommend people come and check it out and give it a test drive, especially if they're considering something very similar to what the Emkoo delivers.